Welcome to the Bold Badass Business Show. And you all, I have to tell you, I don't even want to give my normal introduction today to the show because I am just thrilled to have today someone whose work has really impacted me and the way that I think about business, in the way that I think about kindness. And that is Bob Burg. Now, some of you probably know that Bob has been in this space for over 30 years. He told me exactly 34 years. And he is the author of Endless Referrals, which is a sales classic, of course. And he's the author of The Go Giver, co author of The Go Giver. And also, there's Go Giver at Work, right, Bob?
Yeah, there's a few in the series. Yeah.
There's a whole load of them. I've got several of them, but my favorite is the Go Givers.
Thank
And
you.
you all, I'm so thrilled to have him here because this message I think is so needed in our world today. And so without further ado, we're going to jump right in and I want to welcome you to the show, Bob. You are definitely a business badass.
Thank you, Dr. Barnsley. I appreciate you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's the truth. It's the truth. And I was thrilled when I met you through that networking event because you are someone I followed. And actually,
Oh,
you know
thank
what, Bob? You and I met a while ago too. I realized this afterwards. We met through Tim at Dancing Elephants in Cary because you came to give a talk there many years ago in Cary, North
Cary,
Carolina.
North Carolina. I do remember that now. Yeah.
Yes, but
Yep.
I had forgot. I
One
don't know if
time
we
I've
met in
spoken in
person.
Cary. Yep.
Yeah, so really wonderful to see you again. And I
Thank you.
love that you have over 3 decades in this space. And so I want to ask you, what is it about being a go giver that you would say is so important right now in our world and in our business marketplace?
Well, I mean, I think when we look at what is a go-giver, what do we mean by the term? What's the basic premise involved? And it's simply understanding that shifting your focus, and this I really believe is where it all begins. Shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding, excuse me, that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of way out there, woo woo, magical,
Yeah,
mystical kind of reasons. Not at all. It's actually very
right.
logical, it's very rational. When you're that person, and I know you're very much like this, when you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place
Mhm.
it on serving others, discovering their needs, their wants, their desires, making it about helping them solve their problems and challenges, making it all about helping move them closer to happiness. Well, people feel good about you. They feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. And they want to tell the world about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. And again, it's a fulfilling way of conducting business and it's highly profitable. So, that in answer to the question, that's why I think operating that way is very productive.
Absolutely. So there is absolutely going to be personal gain when we when we put
Yeah.
others
Yeah.
above ourselves or before ourselves and when we're focused on how we can serve. And I think that I'm really glad you say there's nothing magical about that. I mean, that's just reality.
Yeah.
It's about relationships, right?
Mhm.
And I love that that you define this as providing immense value. And there's so many ways we can do that. Sometimes it's just listening, right?
Oh, so often it's listening. The best thing it's when you're in a sales conversation with someone, with a prospective customer or client, the most important part of that conversation is the discovery aspect. And that would be discovering their needs, wants, and desires, how you are best able to serve them through your product, service, or whatever else you do. Well, how do you discover that? You listen, you ask questions, and then you listen. And then you gently, tactfully clarify to make sure that what they said and what they meant is what you understood. Because sometimes that doesn't happen because we all come from different sets of beliefs, ways of looking at the world, ways of seeing things. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes the most valuable gift you can do is just listen to that other person.
And Bob, I actually, as you say that, I was thinking, I don't even like the word sales, to be honest. I use the word enrollment because really what we're doing, as I see it, is enrolling someone in their vision and that they can have it happen, that it is absolutely entirely possible. And there's a way to make it happen. So, what would you say about that? Do you have special words that you prefer to sales, or do you have certain ways that you look at that conversation? Because I
Mhm.
really see it as it's like a sacred thing. That
Yeah.
person may never have been heard in the way that we listen with them.
So I actually embrace the word sales, and let me share
Mhm,
why. And let
mhm,
me reframe it a little bit, because most people, when you hear people say, "Oh, I could never sell. I don't like sales." It's not that they don't like sales. It's that they don't like what they think sales is.
mhm,
Because if you believe, and this is, how it's usually seen on television and
mhm.
movies and in books, and unfortunately sometimes through salespeople,
Yes.
if you see sales as trying to convince someone to buy something they don't want or need,
Mhm.
which by the way is not sales, that's called being a con artist.
That's
Right.
manipulation.
Right, that's manipulation, that's not sales. So of course, if you have a good set of values, well, you would never wanna do that. But let's look at what selling really is. First, by definition, selling is simply discovering what that other person needs, wants, or desires and helping them to get it. But let's take it deeper. The Old English root of the word sell was "selan," which
Mhm,
meant to give. So when you're giving, when you're selling, excuse me, you're literally giving. Now, one could
mhm.
say, "Wait a second, Berg, that's clever and everything, but isn't that just semantics? When you're selling, you're giving. What are you really giving?" Well, let's say you're in this conversation, this sales conversation with this prospect. You're selling. Well, if you are, what exactly are you giving that person? I suggest you're giving them time, attention, counsel, education, empathy, and ultimately exquisite value. Now, when we look at sales and selling that way, now we can really embrace the word sales and see it as a positive thing. So when someone says, let's say, I'll hear people say to us, "Well, Bob, instead of selling, why aren't you just, you know, um, helping?" Well, you are, but it's both. Selling is helping. Well, instead of selling, can't we just say serving? Well, we don't have to do it instead of. Selling, by definition, is serving. So again, I think it all comes down to how you see a thing, and words have power. So if we see selling as a negative, well, we want to kind of use any word that's not selling. If we see it as a positive, then we embrace it because we kind of know this is really what it represents. So I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong. It's just how I see it.
Yes, and you really have redefined it. Sales as service. That's a redefinition from the traditional, kind of manipulative sales that's transactional. See, that's the thing too, is that when we're really serving, we're not just going to be there for the quote unquote sale. We're not just going to be there for when the money or the Venmo or the Zelle is transferred. We're actually going to be there from the moment that we first meet that person through, hopefully, as long as we continue to do the work that we do, as long
Yeah,
as we have that privilege.
and it is a privilege, absolutely.
It is a privilege. And, sometimes actually, we can get so deep. Sometimes with folks in the coaching work I do, we get so deep that really they're moved to tears when we talk, Bob. And I will start crying with them too during this sales conversation, because they're telling me about why they care about writing this book or why they care about having this business that helps
Mhm.
abused women do such and such, or why they care about having this animal
You know.
rescue organization. By the way, I saw that you're speaking my language about animals. How many do you have, Bob? Let's be real. How many
Well,
animals do you have?
I only have one right now because this was a rescue cat that was supposed to be what do you call it? When you
Foster.
foster.
Foster?
But what happened was it was like many of them that have come through my house. He was abused when he was
Mhm.
a kitten, and he had some really significant biting issues.
Oh,
So
wow.
we had found a full time parent, a forever home, as we say, and but he unfortunately really bit into the person who fostered, and so she gave him back, and we can't really find anyone else for him. So, and I love him, I don't mind. So he's mine, but he's not open to any other animals being in the home. So before him, and between my last one and him, I had all sorts of, there's times I had 1, 2, 3 at a time, a bunch of kittens whose mom had been, and it's a sad thing that this thing is even needed. But I had been what I call a node in a network of fosters, and now I can't foster anymore because Buddy is kind of my full-time guy now here.
Is Buddy his name?
Yeah, I named him. I renamed
Buddy,
him.
not Bitey.
Yeah, right. Not Bitey, not Bitey boy, but Buddy boy.
Buddy boy. Well, I have a big old lab named Buddy who's 90 pounds. And we have 5 now, Bob.
For you.
We have 5. We have 3 dogs and we have 2 cats. And Fezziwig is our latest quote unquote foster. You know how that goes. My daughter's like, Mom, we don't have boundaries. Because he came in and he was old. He'd been in the shelter 7 months and he was getting signs of extreme stress, and they needed somebody to take him. And he's just the best dog ever. So we said, well, we'll just adopt him.
And they know they've been rescued, the loyalty.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He has some abandonment issues. Well, you all may say, well, why are they talking about animals? But here's the thing, you all. When we connect with people, the best connections are made over our values. Would you say, Bob? What are our values in life? And that's why I so appreciate your work, because it just really, for me, you're speaking my language. Even when you quoted all the English, you're speaking my language, because I'm always saying that the word wealth comes from wheel, which is Old English for well-being. So think about that, and our well-being is directly related to our relationships. They've actually proven in positive psychology that the better our relationships, the longer we live.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
So why not have that be part of your business, everybody? Those of you listening, why not have those relationships be relationships where the people not only are your clients, but really you can say they're your friends. They're friends. They're people that you would actually enjoy, spending time with, not something where you feel like you have to do the 4-letter word work. I don't believe in that. So, Bob, you've just done so many interesting things. I don't even know what question. Seriously, I don't even know what I want to ask you, because you're just an interesting human being, and there's so much I could ask you, but nothing's coming to mind right now. So I'm going to be honest about that. I'm just thrilled to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of thinking about the Dalai Lama. How he says kindness is his religion. And how powerful is that, right?
It is. Yeah. And he's also somebody who interestingly holds as the highest value happiness, which so many people think, oh, well, isn't that selfish? No, not at all. Because happiness, and I mean, this is, my personal definition. So again, I never want to say it's the definition. It's just mine. I believe happiness is it's an ongoing feeling of joy and peace of mind, which is the result of living congruently with one's values. So, and I guess I got to be careful when I say that, because when I say, of joy and peace, it doesn't mean you're always feeling happy and joyful and grateful. That's not the thing. It's not some magical thing. It means that basically your life is one of the all-encompassing joy. You have peace of mind, and that's because you're acting congruently with your values. You cannot be, again, in my opinion, you cannot be happy if you are living incongruently with what you most value. And I'm not talking about what the world or what society says you should value, or what you think you should value, or even wish you valued, but what you actually do value. You simply cannot be happy if you're not living congruently with that. If you hold as a high value being an honest person, let's say, and you are pilfering office supplies, from your company, you can't be happy if that really is a value, if honesty really is a value. for you. If a high value for you is quality and quantity time with your family, and you find yourself working 18 hours a day and hardly seeing your family, and I'm not talking about, for a week or 2 weeks because you have a project or something. I'm talking about over the course of time.
Yeah.
You can't possibly be happy. It doesn't matter how much money you're making or how whatever. If it truly is a high value to spend quality and quantity time with your family, and you're not, you can't be happy. So with the Dalai Lama, happiness, everything's measured. And by the way, I totally agree with him. Happiness to me is the highest human value. And the reason is because it simply means you're living congruently with your values.
It's the way we can tell, right? It's a symptom of good living in alignment, is that happiness. By the way, one of my favorite books is The Art of Happiness. Have you read it, Bob?
I haven't, which is too bad because I should have read that book and I just have not. And I'm always amazed with all the books I've read, how many I still haven't read.
It's such a good book. It really is. It's one of those books that I've given to a number of people because I think he just hits the nail on the head about, our lives are meant to be connected and meant to be in service. And that's how we can create meaning and happiness. So what are your highest values, Bob? I want to ask you that because, usually most people, when you say, hey, what are your highest values? And that is a question I ask, by the way, in some of my seminars, they say, well, what do you mean? And I say, well, what is the thing that you would what are the 5 or 6 values or principles that you would really stand by? If somebody stuck a gun to your head and pushed you up against the wall and said, tell me your 5 highest values, what would you say?
Well, so the overarching one is happiness, because I think without that, none of the other values are going to really mean anything, because that happiness is dependent upon right. So the next one would be truth, and that's not to be confused with honesty. Honesty is a very high value, but when I talk about truth, I'm saying it's living in truth, living with understanding the way things are, not the way I want them to be. And the more I study human nature and read lots of books and have discussions and talk to people, the more, and this is over 30 years of doing this, studying this, the more I continue to realize how much we fool ourselves and how much we don't live in truth, how much we rationalize, which if you break up the word rationalize, it means we tell ourselves rational lies. And that's to allow ourselves to believe what we want to believe rather than the truth. And to me, one element of very successful people is that they strive to live in truth. Now, this doesn't mean that you're constricted by the truth. That, so, well, this is just the way it is, nothing I can do about it. No, not at all. It means that you understand this is the truth. How do I work within that truth in order to advance things, how to progress and so forth. So really looking at trying to, really focus on, getting to the truth, letting go of my own defensiveness, checking on myself to make sure I'm not suffering from some type of cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias or something, and really just embracing what is the truth of the situation. And I got to say, it is very difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, at least for me. It's not, because there's so many things that I don't want to be the way they are, but they are.
And we've got to get out of denial about, rosy colored glasses and thinking it's not. There's a piece of, we can't have change. We can't affect change unless we really understand what the situation is.
Right.
To begin with.
Yeah. Before you can break the rules, you first got to understand the rules and master them. Then you can, break. Yeah.
And then you can consciously break them. And I think that's where your redefinition really of sales as service and really looking at that is so important, right? It takes us into a whole nother realm and not just into here are the sales skills you can learn. Really, sales skills, sales skills are nothing unless that person is congruent and in
Sure.
a state of alignment with their own values,
Oh,
and
definitely.
some of those values are shared with the person who's in front of them, would you say?
I would say 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we got to be vulnerable to let people know what our values are, right?
Mhm.
I think sometimes, and this is interesting because taking a stand, being willing to say, hey, I'm a stand against human trafficking, or I'm a stand about people having, for me, it's about women having 6 figure and up businesses so that we can continue to give to the causes we most care about. Because it's usually women who are doing the volunteer work more than anybody, sadly. Um, Women, we need to have those financial resources so that we can give and we can change the world. And that's my stand. Uh, so what would you say, Bob, if you had to sum up, and I know I'm asking you unusual questions today, but if you had to sum up your life in just one phrase, like the stand that you are in the world, what would you say? I stand for what?
Uh, I'd say it's encouragement, encouraging others. It would be, that hopefully people would say after I'm gone that Bob made other people feel genuinely good about
Mm,
themselves.
I
That's
love that.
that's
Yeah.
probably.
And I love the word encouragement, right? To put someone else, to help someone else be in a state of courage.
Mhm.
You made me think about something earlier when you were talking about how we are in sales conversations. Part of that is letting someone else borrow our belief in them because, really we're like their partner in believing.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not believing the business is possible, or maybe they're not believing they can grow it or leverage it into 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever they want.
Mhm.
But we're that person who's put there in front of them to be that anchor that, yes, indeed, you can. And there are ways to do it. So Bob, you have recently written a foreword for a new book, right? How to acquire, oh gosh, I
Oh, yeah,
bought the book.
Richard Wildman's, book.
Yes, I bought it after I heard you talking about
Yeah,
it.
100 Proven Ways to Acquire and Keep Clients for Life. I've been following his work for about 30 years.
Mm,
He has an amazing story. He was orphaned at I think 6 years old. He lived in
mm,
something like 18 different foster homes, went to 11
mm.
different schools. And he has a story about what happened one Christmas where he was basically in a stranger's cellar for 2 weeks while his foster family went to see their real family.
Oh,
Oh, it's just a horrifying story to me.
mm,
But he didn't use that as a reason to not succeed. He used it as inspiration. And this guy has helped so many people, so many companies. He's really redefined what the customer experience is, and it's just
mhm.
a terrific book.
And even to look at it as a customer experience, like it has a sort of expansion to it instead of customer service, but
Right,
it's
exactly.
customer experience from the
Experience.
beginning through.
Hmm.
I love that nowadays we talk about customer experience because again, that gets us away from that transactional modality of business, just seeing it as the moment that the money changes hands. So I know that some people here are thinking, okay, so what is it in your life? So I want to ask this. What is it in your life that really you would say was a culminating moment when you realized, I want to be a go giver? That's what I really want to be in my life when I grow up.
Well, I don't think I've ever used the word "go giver" when speaking
Mhm.
about myself, or any. I don't really use the word. It's other than if I'm explaining the concepts in the book. Um, so, but
Well, how do
I
I want to be a giver then?
no, well, just I mean, I think what it is, I was very, very lucky to have great parents
Mhm.
who just modeled this kind of as a way of life, and I just got to grow up seeing how they treated others and so forth. And then yeah, I mean, you grow up and you see certain things in the world, and you get into business, and you see people doing things in certain ways, and some are congruent with what you've seen and learned, and others aren't. And you see some people who seem to do things the wrong way and succeed, and you see
Yeah.
others who do it the right way and don't. But what you see though as a pattern is what counts. And what I began to notice was consistently those people who were totally, absolutely laser focused on bringing value to others, to the world around them, these were the people who were the most successful people financially, emotionally, mentally, relationally, and so forth. So you can't really look at just the things that happen. You've got to look for patterns.
Hmm.
And that's, kind of where I said, this is the path. But again, I think having parents as I did set me on that path,
Mhm.
but then kind of noticing once I got out into the real world what it was really like, and that, yeah, these are the successful people. These are the people I want to be like, that I want to emulate. But I don't think I ever said, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, as much as it just kind of grew into that,
It
you know.
unfolded that way. Right. And we can learn by seeing what doesn't work, right? And
Oh,
as much
absolutely.
as we can by what does. Were your
So
parents in business? I'm curious about that. Were your parents in business, or what kind of work did they do?
yeah. Well, so my dad grew up very, very poor, sort, the kind of real typical Americana, the American slum of the inner city type of thing. And my mom grew up, I think, more middle class. Um but dad had a very natural way with people. He was just a
Mhm.
people person. With me, it wasn't as natural. With dad, it really was. And after he got back from World War II, he ran the Fifth Street Gym in Miami Beach, which was a very famous gym back then. And he went back to his home city where he grew up, and he opened up a place. He was teaching boxing to kids, and uh, word got around, and more people were bringing their kids so that dad could teach them. But then he went into other areas of self-defense, which my dad was trained in. And then he started seeing that as you made people, and also aside from the self-defense, the martial arts part, more into sports as well. And what dad kind of saw, and this is what's so special, because he never went to college, never had a
Mhm.
college education, but again, just naturally had a gift,
Mhm.
was he started seeing that to the degree you could make a person feel comfortable with themselves physically, that's also the degree they could feel comfortable with themselves socially and emotionally and relationally and so forth. And so what he did is he actually built a gymnasium school. In a sense, it was called the Academy of Physical and Social Development, and
Wow.
it was actually written up. He was written up in Time magazine back in
Look at that.
1971. And it's funny because people who at some of the, and this is in the Boston area, and people
Mhm.
who were studying at some of the real fancy schools, getting their MBAs, and their would come to intern at the academy. Yeah.
That's so
And so,
fabulous.
yeah. And so, and he had, psychologists sending their kids. And so it ended up being, it wasn't just the kids, but it was the whole families who would be in these sessions together. And so it became much more than just a physical sports and self-defense and so forth. It became a whole family dynamic and a whole thing. So it's really hard to explain what he did, because I think he was the first person to actually do that.
And
But
I'm
yeah.
trying to think if I know of any other people who've done that sort of thing. I have somebody who I coached who does Krav Maga, and some of the families would go together. But to
Oh,
call
well, of
it
course, that's a
physical and
and that's a yeah.
social
Yeah,
is
this was more of a whole holistic
yes,
kind
like
of
a
thing, as
holistic
opposed to just
center.
teaching. Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. He was obviously on the cutting edge, and he may
Oh,
not have even
he
realized
was,
it.
and he didn't realize it. No, he was just doing what he did. He just had a gift.
What a
So,
gift. What an
yeah.
example for you. So
Oh, yeah.
being a trailblazer has never been really an issue for you because you saw that with
Well,
him.
I like to think I'm, following in dad's footsteps. And when I say
Mhm,
that what I'd like people to say about me was he made people feel genuinely good about themselves. That's
mhm.
exactly what dad did. Just always made people feel genuinely good about themselves. People just loved him because really he made them feel, and I just got to watch. I got to observe.
Beautiful. And
So
you got to learn from him,
I got to learn from him. Yeah.
and you got to model that, which is so important. So I'm thinking about a couple of things for the listeners, really, remember that somebody is always watching you. All right.
Mhm.
And it may not be your own kid. It may be the kid next door. It may be the mail woman or the mailman. It may be the person you see at the coffee shop. But people are watching us and deciding how they're going to behave based on how we conduct ourselves.
True.
And so everybody really is a leader. That is something I believe, that leadership is not a position, it's a way of being.
Mhm.
It's not that you're suddenly called the manager. No, it's your way of being in the world. So you're making me think about that. And the other thing I think is so powerful about what you just said, Bob, is you said helping other people be encouraged and feel good about themselves. Those of you listening, this is a mission. This is a mission statement right here. I want to help encourage others, and I want them to feel good about themselves when they leave me. And then there are a million ways we can fulfill that mission, right? We can
Mhm.
write books, we can teach, we can be a garbage person and fulfill that. It really doesn't matter. But to understand why you're truly put on the planet, and what is that special gift that you have, is so
Mhm.
important. I think if more people were in touch with that, Bob, and could articulate, I mean, it's just a simple thing, but just articulate that one sentence. I stand for encouraging people and having people leave me feeling better, good about themselves. Um, that's so powerful. So I
Thank
want
you.
to say to everybody listening, think about, why are you here? What is it that you bring? And really, you've got to understand that if you're going to go into business, or if you're already in business, you've got to really understand that, because it's going to determine what your actions are. It's going to determine where you go. I love that. So, Bob, in terms of being a go-giver, as you articulate this in your book, what are some specific ways that people can give more value, especially in business, in life and in business? What are some ways that you'd love to highlight before we finish up here?
Well, I think it's in everything we do. It's through, the excellence we provide. It's through consistency. Uh,
Yes.
it's through attention to details, meaning to that person as a person. It's the empathy we provide and communicate. It's the appreciation and the gratitude we show. It could be sharing information with people, connections. Sometimes, as you said, just listening.
Mm.
So yeah, I think there's as many ways as there are parts of our imagination that can come up with them.
And with a view to lift somebody a little higher, just lift them a little higher than they are,
Mhm.
however you may do that. I like to Facebook bomb people, Bob. If you and I ever become Facebook friends, which I would love, by the way, you'll see a Facebook bomb for me. It's a good thing, though. It would be me putting a special quote that reminds me of you, or
Oh,
putting a song that reminds me of you. And
thank
I
you.
believe if we had a world where people were doing this every day, like every day, just choose somebody that you appreciate and go give them a little reflection of who they are in the world. Like, how great would our world be? How much better would it be? I really believe that. So, Bob, I know that as we draw it to a close, that you have something you're gonna offer everybody, that they can go get off your website, or and we will put it in the freebie vault, which you don't even need to give your web address. We know you are at burg.com, right? So that you can
Burg.com.
find all about Bob there at Burg.com. But is there something that you'd like to give everyone that we can put in the freebie vault that will give them access to, say, a checklist or something interesting that you've got?
They can register if they like to my free, not weekly, daily uh, email that I send out. It's called,
Beautiful.
called the Daily Impact, and they can get that just through burg.com. There'll be an annoying little pop up, and they can just put their name in and email address, and boom, it will arrive every morning, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock.
That's so fabulous. And it'll help you get your day going on the right, in the right frame of mind. That's fantastic. So we'll be sure to put that into the vault. And everyone, that you can find the vault at bit.ly/ free from Dr. B, DRB. Again, it's bit.ly/ free from Dr. B. And boy, there are thousands and thousands of dollars of great things there from our guests that you can go through that will just make your life better and help you be a badass in business. So, Bob, I've really enjoyed this time with you. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. I just hope that you will continue doing what you're doing for another 50 years. How's that?
Well, and you as well. I appreciate you and everything you are and everything you do.
Thank you, Bob. And everyone remember, giving and being of service is the secret, I think, to being a badass, but also to being happy in your life and transmitting that, spreading that on this planet. See you next week, everybody. Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. Thanks again, Bob.